Hello and welcome back. In this video, we are going to create our first consumer, and that is going to be the method to consume messages from the Auth service. So when a user creates an account, when a user registers, we are going to send a message or an event to the notification service from the Auth service so that they can send an email to the user that just created an account for them to verify their email. And remember, we are using the AMQP library. And if you scroll down here, this is the callback API if you're using the callback, but we're using the promise async API. We already created our connection. We already created a channel. Okay. And now what we want to do is to consume. Remember, the notification service will not send any event, will not publish any message. It will only consume messages. Okay, so we are going to create the methods for consuming messages. And to consume messages, this is you use the consume method, and it takes in a callback. Now you have the queue, the name of the queue, and then you have the message. Okay, so this is what we are going to implement right now. Now let's go to our code. Let's go to source, go to queue. And inside the queues folder, I'll create a file. I'll call it email consumer. So email.consumer.ts. Okay. Or let me spell that correctly. Consumer.ts. Okay. Now, if you check the connection, remember we've already created our connection. We connected, created a channel. Okay. And here we return the channel, and we are using it inside this start queues method. Now, what we are going to do in this consumer, the first method we are going to create, we are going to pass in this channel. Okay, so we pass in this channel right here that is being returned from this create connection method. And then also we are going to check if the channel does not exist, then we have to create the channel inside the consumer. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is import channel from AMQP and then consume message. Okay, these are just interfaces. Okay, let me fix this. I think it requires, yeah. Then the next thing is, let's add our logger. Okay. Okay, so we import logger from Winston. We import our Winston logger from our library, and then we import config. Okay, make sure you get config, your own. You can see config. We can get config from Winston. You can get config from .env. If you don't want to just stress yourself, you can just rename it. Okay, just go to your config file. You can just rename it to your notification config or something like that. Okay, so that you don't get confused and then accidentally import config from a different library. Okay, we have our Elasticsearch URL. Now our queue, so I'll call this email consumer. Okay, so that is the name. Now let us go ahead and create the first consumer function. The first consumer function is going to consume messages from our Auth service. So it's going to be an async function. Okay, now for the, well, I'm using regular function. You can use arrow functions if you want. Okay, so I'll call this consume Auth email messages. Okay, this will take in a channel of type channel. Okay, it's not going to return anything. Okay, so it's going to return void, but since it's asynchronous, because of this async, we are going to return promise void. Okay, now this is not an arrow function, it's just a regular function. If you don't have this async keyword here, then you just return only void. Okay, but here we are returning promise void. I'm going to use a try catch. Okay, as usual, let's add the log here for error messages, so I can copy one of these. So if there's an error with the consumer, I'll say notification service email error email consumer, or let me call it email consumer, and then add, okay, just to identify, okay, this is coming from the notification service, email consumer, the method, and it's an error. Okay, so this is for the catch block. Now let us add to the try block. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if this channel does not exist, then we need to create the channel. If no channel, okay, then I'm going to set channel equal to await create connection. Yeah, it's saying channel because channel the connection returns channel or undefined. So what we just need to do is cast it. So just cast it as channel, okay, because in this case, so we're expecting it to return the channel. So if the channel does not exist, when we call this method and we pass in channel, if it does not exist, then instead create a new channel. Now let's start using what we've already talked about. Remember, we need an exchange name, because when we publish a message, the publish function will take in an exchange. It's going to take in a routing key and the type. So let's say, for example, we call the channel.publish from the Auth service. We are going to test this. So we call the publish method. Okay. Now the publish method will take in an exchange name. Let's say this exchange name would Jobber email notification. This is the exchange. So this is how you create an exchange. Just add a name, and then it's going to take the routing key. Okay, so the routing key, we can call the routing key Auth email. So give it a name that you can use to identify exactly from what this particular message does. Okay, so the routing key, and then you can pass in your messages. Okay, so this is my message. Okay, so whenever we want to publish, this is the format we are going to use. We are going to pass in the exchange name, we are going to pass in the routing key, and then here we pass in the message as well. But before we call this, we are going to assert an exchange. So in the publish function that we are going to create later, we are also going to call channel.assert exchange. Okay, so this will pass in or take in the exchange name and the type. So what type of exchange? Direct exchange or fan out exchange or topic exchange, whatever. So but for our own case, it's going to be a direct exchange. Okay, so this is how we are going to be publishing messages. We assert the exchange, and then where we need to consume, we are going to assert the exchange, the name that is sent from the publish method, which is this. Then we are going to use the routing key, and then also we are going to assert that, okay, check, we are sending a direct exchange. Okay, so this is the idea when publishing the message. So right here, I'm going to first of all call await, or let me define the exchange name. The exchange name will be Jobber email notification. Okay, so the publish method will publish a message to the exchange, not the queue. Okay, and this is the exchange name we are using. Okay, so anytime we publish a message with the exchange name Jobber email queue, then it's going to look for the queue that is attached to this exchange via the routing key. Now let's create a routing key. So const routing key. I'll call the routing key Auth email. Okay, so I'm calling it Auth email so for it to be identified easily, so I can identify it. Okay, and then we can now create our queue name. So const queue name, and then what is the name of the queue you want to use? You can call this anything. Okay, Auth email queue. Okay, now what this means is when the message is sent to the exchange, this is the exchange name. Now this queue name is bound to this exchange via the routing key. Okay, so anytime you send a message with the exchange name and with the routing key, the message will always go to this queue. Okay, so that is just what you need to know. Anytime you publish a message to this exchange Jobber email notification using this routing key, okay, then it's always going to send that message to this queue. Okay, and then every consumer attached to this queue will get that message. Okay, this is how it just works. This is the basic idea of publishing a message and then attaching a queue or routing a message from an exchange to a queue. Now let us assert the queue. So let's check if this Jobber email notification queue exists. So await channel.assert exchange. So the exchange is this is the exchange name, and then we pass in what type of exchange do we want to send. We want to use a direct exchange. So what this means is it's going to send a direct message from the exchange to the queue using this routing key. Okay, so we are asserting that okay, this exchange exists, and then we also need to assert the queue. Okay, so this queue, with using this queue name await, I'll create, or rather let me create it as a const, because we are going to use this queue name. So I'll say queue equals to await channel dot assert queue. Okay, so we want to assert that the queue exists. Okay, and now this needs the queue name. Okay, it takes, if you hover on this, it takes in the queue name and some options. Now we are going to pass an option, and the option will be durable. We set it to true. So what this means is if the queue restarts, we want the message to persist. Okay, if we set it to, I think the default is false. What that means is if the queue restarts for any reason, maybe network issue or for some reason, then you are going to lose the message. But with durable set to true, if the queue restarts and as long as it has not yet been consumed, the message will still persist. And then do we want to auto delete? No. So auto delete, we set it to false. Okay, so we don't want to auto delete the message. We only remove the message from the queue once we acknowledge them. Okay, and then we need to bind the queue. So with await channel dot bind queue, and then here we pass this queue, or I can call it Jobber queue. So Jobber queue.queue, this queue object has the queue property, and then we pass in the exchange name, which is this, and then we pass in the routing key. So what this bind queue method does is it's what creates the paths between the exchange and the queue via this routing key. Okay, so the assert exchange, it asserts or checks that the exchange exists. The assert queue, okay, it checks that the queue exists, and we set it to durable and auto delete false. We return the queue, and now we need to create the path, the routing path between the exchange and the queue using the routing key. That is where this bind queue comes into play. So the bind queue takes in the queue name, the exchange name, and the routing key. Now we need to consume the message. So we call channel.consume. Now remember, this will take in the queue name, jobber.queue, and then it will take in an asynchronous callback, async message. I can call it MSG, and it's going to be of type consume message, okay, or null. And then here we can use a callback, an arrow function. Okay, now here, if you want to see the message, remember we are going to be sending the messages some as either buffers or as strings. Okay, so if it's a string, then we need to pass the data using JSON.pass. Okay, so here I can do a console.log, and then we call JSON.pass, and then message.content.toString. Okay, here we are not adding any acknowledge. So if we send any message, we want to see it in the queue before we acknowledge them. Okay, so this is just what we need to do. I'm not adding later, then we implement what we need to implement, send the emails. Okay, send emails and then acknowledge. Okay, so the data we need is going to be inside this content property. Okay, and then we convert it to string, then using this JSON.pass we convert it back to its original form. So if it's an object, because it's going to come as a stringified object, then we convert it back to the original object. And then here we just need to export this method. Okay, so we just need to export the method. Now, how do we use this? We are going to use it in our server TS file. We'll use it here in the server TS file, but I will stop here. In the next video, we are going to use our email consume auth email messages function.